Today's daf we're going to be learning is Kiddushin Daf Mem Zayin. Today's daf is sponsored by Gail Licht in loving memory of her father, Harav Avraham Shaul Halevi Licht. He would have been very proud of his children and grandchildren, all engaged in lives filled with Torah study and acts of chesed. Yashikov to my grandson Yaakov Stechler and Nasim of Mishnayot Seder Nezikin, and to his dad Rabbi Aryeh Stechler, his Siyum of Kiddushin and Anasim of Kiddushin in my dad's memory. May our learning also be in memory of all the soldiers and civilians that have been killed, and for Yitzchut, for Refuah Shlema, for all the injured. We continue to pray for the safety of our soldiers, those living in the south under direct attack, those taken captive, and all the citizens of Israel. Okay, we'll get started with our daf. We were in the middle of a topic. Again, let's just review. We have a Mishnah with a list of all sorts of items that are forbidden to benefit from. What we're basically going to do and finish or continue today to tomorrow's daf is go through the list and explain what is the source. How do we know that these things are forbidden to benefit from? There's only one exception to the rule where that's not exactly what they do with it, but that's not exactly what they do when they quote it. But we're basically going to quote each part of the Mishnah and then go in depth usually into what's the source that it's forbidden to benefit from. So in the context of our discussion about the Shor HaNiskal yesterday, we ended with this. We were darshaning the pasuk. In the end, we kind of said that really from the word lo ye'achel episaro, you can't eat its flesh. We really learned that it's forbidden to benefit, and not only to eat, but also to benefit. From there, the Gemara says, then what do you do with the words Baal Hashor Naki, which in the beginning we thought that's where we learned forbidden to benefit, because Naki meaning you're cleaned out of all your financial, you have no more financial benefit from this animal. In the end, they say, well, it comes to say not only can you not benefit from the meat, because it said lo yachel episaro, also, which is the flesh, the meat, you also can't benefit from the skin. To which they said, what about the people who say that Baal Hashor Naki is actually coming to say you're actually, if it was a short time that had never injured or hadn't injured 3 times yet and killed a person, then not only you don't have to pay your full value of the person who damaged, right? Normally you have to pay a ransom, but maybe you pay half payment. Well, according to some people, no, Baal Hashor Naki means the owner actually is not responsible at all, doesn't have to pay anything to the people. And as again, they lose their ox has to get killed, but they don't actually have to pay any money out of pocket other than losing their shore. And if it killed a pregnant woman, you wouldn't have to give any value for the fetus. Well, what do you do with them? Baal Hashor Naki is not free. Where are you going to learn that you can't benefit from the hide? That was where we left off. Mi et bisaro, et atapel bisaro. The extra word et comes to say we can include something additional. What is that? What's not only the basar, but what is secondary to the basar? And what's that? The flesh, because the flesh contains the basar, right? It keeps the meat inside. So the word et comes to include that. So now they say the idach, and the other one who doesn't say that will say et lo darish. He just doesn't darshan etim. Okay, whether you darshan in et or not is a subject of debate. As we see, Keditanya, Shimon Hamsuni, V'amr la Nechemya Hamsuni. This is very famous. Whether it was Shimon or Nechemya, Hayad doresh kol etim b'Torah. He would darshan all the ets. Kevan shigia le'et Hashem lokechatira. But then he gets to in God, and God you should fear. So it said et. What could et possibly include more than fear of God? What is more than that? Perash. So he said, I stopped. I'm not darshaning etim anymore. Amrulo tamidav Rebbe, kol etin shedarashta ma te'eh lehem. So then the students came and said, you've been spending your life darshaning every single et in the Torah. What, are we supposed to just erase all those drashot? Now you don't think that we could darshan etim? Amar lahem, very famous line, kashem shekibalti sachar al hadrisha, kach kibalti ala prisha. Basically, since, right, it's I basically come and admit my mistakes. And just like I got rewarded for darshaning all those ets, now I'm going to get rewarded for undoing all my drashot, erasing them and saying, you know what, I was wrong. Right? It takes a lot of courage to say I was wrong and basically undo your work, and I get reward for that. Rabbi Akiva, but then came Rabbi Akiva Vilimed, and he said, what are you talking about? Et Hashem lokechatira, of course it includes something additional. Et Hashem lokechatira lerabot talmidei chachamim. That comes to include not only God, but representatives of God in this world. Who are that? Who are they? Torah scholars. So from there, you learn that you also have to fear Torah scholars, and therefore, Rabbi Akiva said, here, I'll prove to you that you can darshan etim. Egla arufa minam. So now we want to know egla arufa, moving down our list. How do we know that it's forbidden to benefit from? Amrei debei Rabbi Yanai kapara k'tiva kekodashim. Well, it atones. Because it atones, it's similar to other things that atone. What are the main things that atone? Sacrifices. What do you know about sacrifices? You designate an animal for a korban. Forbidden to benefit. So just like that's forbidden to benefit, also the egla arufa is forbidden to benefit from. Soon we're going to see that it's not just after they break the neck of the egla, but the calf. Even before that, when the egla is still alive, and we'll see exactly at what stage, we'll see it's forbidden b'hana'ah. But we're not going to see it directly in the egla arufa section. We're going to see it in the next section, which is about the tzipurei mitzorah. And tok kedei that, we're going to get back to the egla arufa. So tzipurei mitzorah, let's explain what this is. We have a leper. On the 8th day of they wait all these days, and then there's the last 7 days, and then they do their cleansing process, okay, Tara process over the course of 7 days. On the 8th day, they do what the Gemara is going to call a machshir. It's not a mechaper, it's not an atonement ceremony, but they have certain sacrifices that atone for them, but they have the asha mitzorah they have to bring, which is actually a machshir. What does it mean? Well, while you're a leper, you can't come into the temple, you can't do, right? Remember, they're the zav, the mitzorah, right? There's all these people that mate are all outside the machaneh, each one outside different machanot. They have to be separated from the people in order to allow them to come back in, also to be able to eat sacrificial meat. They have to do this tahara process, which includes bringing an asham, a guilt offering for mitzorah. And it includes these 2 birds and a ceremony done with 2 birds. Now, the first thing to note is that this 2-bird ceremony is not done inside the azara, like usual sacrifices. Okay, there's different laws regarding different things. There's general sacrifices, which are always done in the azara. There's a few ceremonies that have a bit of a different nature because they're done in the temple area, or maybe some not even in the temple area, but they seem to be part of some sort of ceremony that's taking place kind of in the azara, but it's not really, okay? So what, we'll go through the list. Para aduma, okay, when they prepare the para aduma waters, and they do the whole para aduma ashes and all that, they burn it, they do it on the Temple Mount. They don't do it in the azara. Then we have the se'ir mishtaleach, which is the scapegoat that gets thrown off a cliff, which also isn't done, right? It's the major atonement of Yom Kippur is done by throwing the scapegoat off a cliff, and it's not done in the temple at all. It is taken in the temple, right? Remember, we do the goal, we have to figure out which one. And then we have this 2-bird ceremony of the leper. So what do? You slaughter one of the birds, and then you take the blood and you dip the non-slaughtered bird you take an eitz erez ezov and a tolat shani. Okay, you take some hyssop branch and some other things. You put them in a cedar and this red what is it, a wool, I think, and you dip it together with the live bird into the blood, and then you let the bird go free. Okay, maybe it's a thread, thank you. And then you let the bird go free. So it's a ceremony that's done, but it's not done inside the temple in the azara, the main, right, the sanctuary where generally these things are done, has a bit of a different nature than other ceremonies. So, okay, scarlet wool thread. Thank you for getting it exactly right. Okay, so now what do we have? These birds, now we're going to see, it seems to be, it's not even 100% clear that both birds are, well, it's unclear whether it's both birds. Right now, it kind of sounds like both birds, although we're going to see later that ultimately the one we set free is not going to be forbidden to benefit from, only the one that's slaughtered. Perhaps at the earlier stage, before it's set free, it's forbidden to benefit from also. Or perhaps Sipurei Mitzorah is plural, but is really only referring to the slaughtered one. And maybe it just means slaughtered birds in general of the pair. So Sipurei Mitzorah Minala, where do we get it from? The tannitic de Rabbi Yishmael. We're going to have one of these brights out that sounds very confusing. Okay, once I explain it, hopefully it won't be confusing. The wording just sounds a little bit like a riddle type thing. Ne'emar machshir mechaper b'fnim, v'ne'emar machshir mechaper b'chutz. Okay, I told you before, it's a Sipurei Mitzorah or a machshir, because what do? They permit the Mitzorah, by going through the ceremony, it permits him to come back into, or her, to come back into the camp and to be able to eat sacrificial meat. That's a machshir. It just allows you to do something. It takes off some forbidden things that were upon you before. Mechaper is it atones for you. So the asham of the Mitzorah is a machshir, because by bringing that sacrifice, it permits you to eat sacrificial meat and come into the camp again, like come into the temple. And we have mechaper. Now, the Asham Tzara it doesn't atone. But what atones? Well, all other sacrifices. So the first stage is to understand. We have cases of the Asham Tzara, and then we have regular sacrifices. Now, the Meiri says it well, which is the Torah says, kachatat ka'asham, the pasuk, which means the Asham is done exactly like the chatat. In other words, even though it has a different nature and it's not coming to atone, it still is done in the exact same manner as other sacrifices. Okay, you go through the process, you slaughter, you burn certain parts on the altar, the other parts are given to the Kohen to eat. So it's got the exact same thing, even though it's a totally different type of thing. One is machshir, one is mechaper, one atone, right? One permits something, removes some forbidden thing upon you, and one actually atones. So there's a case of machshir and mechaper bifnim, and ne'emar machshir mechaper bachutz. What's the machshir bachutz? The birds of the metzora. They're a process that's done also. It's with the Asham Metzora to permit the metzora to come back into the camp and be able to eat sacrificial meat. And then we have a case, it's done outside the temple though, as opposed to the other machshir, which was done inside. And then we have another case where there's something that we atone for outside the temple. What is that? The egla arufa, which is done not only outside the temple, it's even done outside Jerusalem entirely. Okay, so we have another ceremony where there's atonement, and it's done outside. So now here comes our comparison. Ma machshiru mechaper, the first part, ha'amur bifnim, the Asham Metzora, and all the other korbanot, asabo machshir kemechaper, as I said before, kachatat ka'asham. The asham is done the exact same way as the chatat is. So likewise, we're going to say, ach machshir mechaper ha'amur b'chutz, asabo machshir kemechaper. So the metzora is done just like the one thing that atones outside, meaning if the egla arufa, which we just learned before, is forbidden to benefit from, also the tzipurei metzora are going to be forbidden to benefit from. So that's how we get to it was a very long-winded way to say we're learning it from egla arufa. Okay, we just had to explain on what basis are we learning it from egla arufa, because one is machshir, one is mechaper, and they're both done outside, so we're going to learn one from the other. Just like we learned the machshir and mechaper, one from the other, inside. And now we're going to have a big machloket. At what moment is it forbidden to benefit from? And this is going to take us, this whole sugya, through to the end, almost to the end of Amud Aleph. From what moment are they forbidden? Now, there's basically two stages in the tzipurei metzora. The moment that you purchase the birds, and then the moment that you slaughter one of them. It's either one or the other, because those are the two main stages of doing the mitzvah. The third is obviously sending the bird, but we're not talking about that because that's the one that's going to be permitted. So we need to find from what point is it forbidden, and that wouldn't be the moment of sending it off. But basically, we could say there's three stages. There's buying it, there's slaughtering it, and then there's sending the other one free. So Rabbi Yochanan Amar Mishat Shchita, he says from the moment you slaughter it, that's when it becomes, because it's not, now you have to, again, this is different from a sacrifice. A sacrifice, the moment you designate the animal, purchase it, or decide I'm purchasing this for the purpose of a sacrifice, or you have your animal in a flock and then you say I'm designating this for a korban. At that moment, it's sanctified and you can't do anything with it. You can't benefit. But this is different because it's not a sacrifice. So he says from the moment you slaughter it, not from the moment that you purchase it. Reish Lakish Amar Mishat Lakish. Reish Lakish says it's when you purchase it. So now Rabbi Yochanan Amar, we're going to explain each one. Mishat Shchita, Shchita Huda Asrala. What makes this bird forbidden? The slaughtering of it. Because at the point of purchasing, one is going to be sent off and permitted. The other is going to be slaughtered. So only when, but you don't know which one is which. So only when you slaughter it, does it become forbidden? Reish Lakish Amar, and then according to him, it would sound like the one that gets sent off is never forbidden. Reish Lakish Amar Mishat Lakicha. It's from when you purchase them. And then it would sound like both birds are forbidden at that stage. And then when you slaughter one, that one stays forbidden and the other one becomes forbidden. Where does he get this from? Very simply, egla arufa, although it might not be so simple because you don't necessarily know this yet, but egla arufa, we're going to learn it from egla arufa. Ma egla arufa mechayim. When is the egla arufa forbidden? Not from the moment you break the neck of the animal and he dies, but before that. Now, we don't yet know what stage. We're going to talk about that in a minute. So also, again, right, this goes back to the drasha we saw before. We learned it all from egla arufa, so we're going to learn all the details as well. Only when it's alive, even when it's alive. Egla arufa gufa me'matai. So now they say, from when is the egla arufa forbidden? Amar Rabbi Yanai gvul shamati b'shachachti. I heard they gave it like a time frame, and they said at what stage, but I don't remember what they said. I forgot it. But the students were inclined to say, now that the egla arufa has 3 stages, really. One is the choosing of the egla, okay, like the buying of the birds. Then you have to bring it down to nachalitan. In fact, some of the commentaries say from here that if you were to find, it has to go by a stream. There's all sorts of rules about it. We learned this in Sota. I'm not going to go back to all that right now. But some people say that if you find it next to that stream, you have to actually take it out, up, and bring it back down, because there's a mitzvah. This is an important stage. It has to be brought down to the nachal. It's part of the process. So now, it says, in the egla arufa, it's from the moment you bring it down to the nachal that it becomes forbidden. So therefore, what do you see? Egla arufa, even when it's still alive, because that's before you break its back, its neck. So therefore, you can learn from here that the birds from the moment they were purchased. To which the Gemara says, wait a minute. But wait, if you're going to learn from egla arufa, it's, if you want to say they're comparable, then it should be from the time you purchase the egla arufa, right? We said that's stage 2 in the egla arufa. In the birds, you're saying it's from stage 1. So just like the egla arufa isn't forbidden from the moment you purchase it, also the bird shouldn't be forbidden from the moment of purchase. To which they say, no. Hachi hashta, you're comparing apples and oranges. Hatam ileg v'lachrina. There's stage 1, 2, and 3. Purchasing, bring it down to the nachal, and then killing. In our case, the birds, there's only 2 stages. Hacha, in our case, mi ileg v'lachrina, there is no other stage. There's purchasing, and then there's slaughtering. So it basically has to be one or the other. And if that one was already forbidden when it's still alive, then this one's going to be forbidden when it's still alive. And the only stage that happens before that is to purchase them. There is no other stage. So it would have to be the stage of purchase. So we resolved the question against Reish Lakish. But now we're going to have 3 questions that Rabbi Yochanan throws sources at Reish Lakish and says, these sources, tannitic sources, seem to contradict your opinion. Eitivei Rabbi Yochanan Reish Lakish. So again, Reish Lakish says from the moment of purchasing. And because remember, he learns it from egla arufa. So now Rabbi Yochanan says, look at this source. This is the psukim that talk about kosher, what birds are kosher, what birds are not kosher. And it says, totally different context, but it's talking about birds. That's going to be the connection. In Sefer Devarim, it comes up also in Vayikra, but here it's in Devarim. Kol tzipor Torah tochelu. Any kosher bird, pure bird, you can eat. Kol comes to include something additional. So what does that come to include? L'rabot et hamishulachat, even the bird that you send off can be eaten. Now they say, and this is what you can't eat from them. Now you could have just said zelo tochlu mehem. Why ze ashel? That, right? This is what you cannot eat from them. Okay, so the word asher is not so necessary. L'rabot et hashchuta, that comes to include even the slaughter bird cannot be eaten. Okay, so basically we have 2 psukim that seem to include each one something. One to include it's permitted, one to include it's forbidden. The one that says to include something else permitted is going to include the bird that you send away. The one that includes the bird that's forbidden, the one that includes something that's forbidden, additional, is the one that's slaughtered. Okay, so far, what does this have to do with it? Well, if you think it's forbidden when it's still alive, why do you need to say when it's slaughtered? It's already forbidden before it's slaughtered. So this would make sense to say, oh, we're including also if it's after it's slaughtered, if it's already forbidden before it's slaughtered. So that doesn't make any sense, to which Reish Lakish says, no, I'll explain to you. And now, again, we're going to make this comparison to sacrifices. What happens when you have a sacrifice? You designate the animal is forbidden. Let's say it's a shlamim, okay, or a chatat or an asham. Okay, forget about an ola. An ola gets entirely burnt, it's always forbidden. But normally, when you slaughter that animal, okay, let's say it's a shlamim, a peace offering, or a chatat or an asham, a guilt or a sin offering, you slaughter the animal, and then you sprinkle the blood. After the blood is sprinkled, some parts go on the altar, but the other parts are now permitted either in a shlamim to the owner of it, anyone can eat, the owner can eat and can share it with anybody, or it's permitted to the kohanim, that's in the sin offering and the guilt offering. The kohanim eat the meat of the sacrifice. So you have something that was forbidden, but after it's slaughtered, it's not exactly the slaughtering, but after it's slaughtered and the blood is sprinkled, it now becomes permitted. So it comes to Reish Lakish and he says the following. Why does it have to say the slaughtered bird is permitted it's forbidden if it was already forbidden before? Well, because you might have thought, maybe it's just like sacrifices. that in the beginning it was forbidden when you designated it, but then the shchita actually permits part of it, you have to say. Kamash malan, therefore, they had to tell you even the shchuta is asur. Okay, so first question against Reish Lakish, resolved. Second question, etive. Rabbi Yochanan continues. Another source, shchata v'nimtzei trefa. You take one of those birds that you're going to, right, the two birds for the mitzvah, and you slaughter one of them. That's what you're supposed to do. But after you slaughter it, you realize that the animal, the bird, was sick inside, and it was a trefa. Now, if it's a trefa, it was going to die within 12 months. That's usually the definition, although there's all sorts of definitions. Something was wrong inside. You realize that usually after you slaughter it. Well, what do? This is like the two seirim. So Seir Chala Zalzel and Seir Chala Hashem. Remember what happens? You take the pair, you do the goral, and then one of them, we had a whole long sugya about what if one of them dies or something happens. So then you have to, one of them becomes impure. What do you have to do? Do you take a new one or do you have to take two new ones? So same kind of issue here. Yikach zug lashnia. You don't have to take two new ones at all. You just need to replace the one that got messed up. Okay, the shchuta. So you bring another. Right, zug. You bring what it means is zug. Zug usually means a pair. Well, what it means is you bring a match for the one that exists already. In other words, you have the one you're going to send. That one stays. It's fine. You just bring one to match up with that. You bring another bird. Ba'alishonan, the first one that was a treifa, muter bahana, is permitted to benefit from. Now, wait a minute. How could it be permitted to benefit from? According to Reish Lakish, if you say mishat shchita was no good, so it's not forbidden. That was Rabbi Yochanan. If you say before the shchita was forbidden, why is the first one permitted to benefit from? It was already forbidden from the earlier stage. So what if it's now a treifa? You thought everything was good. It was already designated as something to be slaughtered. It was forbidden. Why would it all of a sudden not be forbidden? So it's true you can't sacrifice. You can not sacrifice, but you can't use it as your tzipor mitzvah. But still, it should continue to be forbidden. To which the Reish Lakish answers, it was a very serious problem that there was a hole in one of the internal organs. In that case, even though this is an interesting thing, you designated it, you made it sanctified, but the fact is you actually did nothing because you didn't know what was inside. Had you known what was inside, it never would have been sanctified. And therefore, it actually wasn't sanctified because the treifa problem is such a big problem that in that case, if it's such a big problem, it's a real serious problem, then it was the fact that you sanctified it was meaningless. And therefore, this isn't a question against Reish Lakish because this is a unique case. Third question against Reish Lakish, and this one we're not going to have an answer for. Eitive. Okay, you now take the hyssop, the cedar branch, and the scarlet thread. Sorry, you slaughter you're supposed to have all that ready when you slaughter the bird. If you slaughter the bird and you didn't have all that stuff right there, then actually you're going to have to bring a new bird and do it all over again. But there's a machloket about since you slaughtered it, okay, and it wasn't a treifa like the previous case, but since it was already slaughtered, so Rabbi Yaakov Omer, because you slaughtered it for the purposes of a mitzvah, even though you didn't do the mitzvah in the proper way, it's forbidden. Rabbi Shimon Omer, Rabbi Shimon says the opposite. You slaughtered it not in the proper way. You're going to have to replace it. Both agree to that. Well, therefore, it's not even called shchita. Okay, that's not a good shchita. Now, notice they disagree about whether. Right? We're going to see it right now. The main debate between them is a shchita that wasn't a good shchita because you didn't do it with the proper materials next to you, which had to be there, right? All that stuff needed to be there. So it wasn't a shchita sheruya. You can't use this for your mitzvah. You're going to have to bring another bird. But you did slaughter it for a mitzvah, and the slaughtering was okay. It wasn't a treifa like the previous case. So do we say that that's going to sanctify the bird or not? Okay? Now, but kule alma miyam b'chaim lo matasra. But notice they all agree that the slaughtering is what will turn it into sanctified. It's just a matter, is it a slaughtering that's a good one or even a slaughtering that wasn't done properly because you didn't have all the materials with you? So that shows that they actually don't think the animal was sanctified before. So now Reish Lakish doesn't have a way to resolve this source. So his simple answer is tanaihi. You're bringing a tannitic source to disagree with me. That's fine. Because the machloket between me and you, Rabbi Yochanan, is the same machloket that tannaim had. So you're pulling out a tannitic source. Fine. That goes on your side. I'll pull out a tannitic source that goes on my side. And therefore, don't question me with that tannitic source. So what's his proof? Actually, a source we've already seen. Ditana de Rabbi Ishmael. Ne'amar, this is where we started in the Sipurim Mitzoah. Ne'amar machshir mechaper mi bifni. Ne'amar machshir mechaper b'chutz. We have, right, the Asha Mitzorah and all korbanot that are all done inside. One is machshir, the rest are mechaper. And we have the machshir mechaper outside, the birds, which is the machshir, and the mechaper, which is the egla arufa. Ma machshir mechaper amor bifni masabo machshir kemechaper, just like the Asham is done exactly the way the other sacrifices are done. Likewise, the Tipurim Mitzorah are done in the exact same way as the egla arufa, meaning they're already forbidden when they're alive. And therefore, he says, that's my source. They're like egla arufa all the way. So Reish Lakish basically says, you have your source to rely on, I have my source to rely on, and we have a debate like the tannaim. Gufa. But before we finish with the Tipurim Mitzorah, we're now, because we finished with this issue, from when do they become a sul? We have this machloket. Rabbi Yochanan brought 3 questions. The Gemara also brought a question on Reish Lakish, which we resolved. Then the Gemara brought 3 questions, and then we resolved them. Next, Gufa. So now we're going to go in depth into the source we quoted before. So again, each pasuk includes a different case. One going to be permitted, one going to be forbidden. So now they're going to say, right, that you can even eat the one sent off, and you cannot eat the one that was slaughtered. V'ipochana, why? Sounds arbitrary. Why didn't we say the one that gets sent off is the one that's forbidden, and the one that we slaughtered is the one that's permitted? To which we're going to have 3 answers. I call it 3 with 1. The first one's going to be like there's 1 and 1A. In other words, we're going to have to change it a little bit because we're going to have a question with it. So the first answer, Rabbi Yochanan mishum Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, lo matzinu ba'alei chayim she'asurim. We don't have a case where live animals are left forever to be forbidden. Okay, just not true. When do we have it? Well, you might have a live animal that you're supposed to slaughter because you said designated as a sacrifice. That's something different because you have a mitzvah to slaughter it. In this case, this bird's going to live for who knows how many years. We don't keep live birds forbidden, which the Gemara says, really? We're going to have 2 questions against this from 2 different examples. The first question is, really not? Turning now to Amud Bet. Hare muktzah v'ne'ebad. Animals that were designated to use for avodah zarah, or animals that were worshipped, people used to worship avodah zarah, idols, that stay alive at this point, but you're not allowed, what are you not allowed to do with them? They're forbidden to use for sacrifices. You can't sacrifice an animal that was used for avodah zarah or even was designated for avodah zarah. So to which the Gemara says, that's not a good proof. You can work that animal. That's not isur hana'ah. That's just, you can't bring a sacrifice in the temple, but you can actually use that animal for all sorts of things outside the temple. So that's not a good question because we're talking about something that's, right, we're talking about forbidding this animal for anyone to slaughter, eat, right? Not temple related. But here's a better question. If there's witnesses that witness an animal either raping a person or a person having relations with an animal, bestiality, who they're animals, you're supposed to actually kill the animal, and yet they're forbidden, right? If let's say there's no courts and they don't kill this animal, well, those animals are forbidden to benefit from forever. If the animal engaged in bestiality, it's forever forbidden. So here you have an example. So what do you mean? There is no example. So Elam Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai. So now they modify what he says. This is 1A. Lo matzinu rov ba'alei chayim she'asurim. Or I should say it better. Lo matzinu rov ba'alei chayim she'asurim. The majority of animals. Now, most animals are not forbidden forever. It's true. You can find an example here or there. But now let's think about what we're trying to do. We want to say, of these 2 birds, we know one is forbidden and one is permitted. Which are we going to put in which category? Well, if most live animals don't end up forbidden b'hana'ah, then we're going to put the slaughtered one in the isur hana'ah category, forbidden to eat and forbidden to benefit from, and put the one that's being sent off and that will live forever, will live for who knows how long, not forever, obviously, but will live for a while. They'll be in the category of the ones that are permitted. Next, second answer. Rabbi Ishmael Tana Dama. Okay, in the house of Rabbi Ishmael, they brought this braita. The pasuk says, what are you supposed to do with this bird that you send off? Vishilach al pnei hasadeh. You're supposed to send it off to face or in the face of the field, okay, or toward the field. Kisadeh. They say, well, it's like a field. What defines a field? Masadeh muteret. A field is in general permitted. So if you're sending the bird into the field, we're going to say it has properties like the field. Field is permitted, so therefore the bird is permitted. Afainami muteret. To which they say, wait a minute. You want to use the word sadeh to learn that, but we use sadeh for a different drasha. We always have that problem. You can't learn two things from one pasuk, or one word. Hi sadeh l'hachi udata. Sadeh really coming for that? We need it for a different drasha. Sadeh, what does it teach you? It goes to the field. You can't stand in Jaffa, right, which is on the water, and throw the bird into the water. Bin Bigvat, which was near the desert, and throw it into the desert. Don't stand outside the city. Where were the fields? The fields were outside the city always. Don't stand outside the city, and throw it into the city, right? Let the bird fly into the city. Ella. What is sad al pnei hasadeh? Comes to teach you literally. You have to stand in the city and let the bird fly out toward the field. That's what it's coming to teach you. Not that it has properties like the field and is permitted to benefit from. Well, v'idach, the one who does learn sadeh, this brighter that we just saw, which is explaining the second answer for how we know that the tzipora meshulachat is the one that is permitted to eat and the one that is slaughtered is forbidden. Well, this is our typical. If you want to learn two things, you say, well, it could have been worded just al pnei sadeh, right, out to a field, because it's not like any particular field. Why does it say the field? That comes to teach you something additional, so you can learn both things, that it's like a field and it's permitted, and that it has to be let go into a field. Rava Amal, third answer. And this is the one that's usually quoted when we ask this question. This is really the best answer, I think. Lo amra Torah shalach letakala. The Torah wouldn't create a situation where people will end up sinning unknowingly. Because if you let this bird go free, imagine the situation. You're basically going to say, okay, the bird that's slaughtered is permitted, but the one that we're sending free, now what happens when a bird goes free, right? They don't put chips in the bird, right? Nowadays we do that kind of thing. You can identify a bird, or, they don't put chips in the bird where everyone knows, you go to slaughter it and a beep goes off, beep, 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 you can't eat me. So that bird's going to be roaming free, and anyone at any point can basically, right, kill that bird, slaughter it, eat it, and not realize that they're doing a sin. So of course, again, it's a matter of choosing. If you're going to choose this bird or that bird, we're going to say it must be the slaughter bird is forbidden, so that we can keep contained. It's not flying around. And the one that is flying around is the one that is not forbidden. Keeping on with our list. Se'ar nazir, the hair of the nazir. Minalam, where do we get this from? Same question they've been asking all along. Da'amakra kadosh yeh gadel peras harosho. Pasuk we've seen a lot when we learned nazir. It will be sanctified, and the nazir should grow his hair. So what do you learn from this? Nazirim grow their hair, and they're sanctified. What does it mean, sanctified? Well, gidulo yeh kadosh, what he grows, right? The hair growth of him or her, right, female or male Nazirite will be sanctified. So therefore, it's sanctified. What do we know about sanctification? Well, it's forbidden to benefit from anything that's sanctified. To which the Gemara says, wait a minute. If you're going to say we're learning it from sanctified items, well, then it should be exactly like sanctified items. What do we know about sanctified items? We talked about this yesterday. If you redeem them onto money, then the money takes on the sanctity, and the sanctity is removed from the object. Well, then, then the hair of the nazir should also have those same properties, that you can redeem it onto money or something else, in which case the sanctity will leave the hair. And we know that's not true. That's what we saw in our Mishnah. All these things, if you sell them and move them onto coins, you don't remove the isur hana'ah, the fact that it's forbidden to benefit from, onto something else. No, it doesn't work that way. So you can't really say it's like kodesh. To which the answer, interestingly, mikrin on kodesh. Notice the word. It doesn't say it's kodesh. It says kadosh, Karina. The pasuk says it's kadosh. It doesn't say kodesh. So that means it's like kodesh, but not exactly like kodesh. And that's how we could get to this in between. It's like kodesh, it's forbidden to benefit from, but it's not like kodesh, that it can't be redeemed and moved onto something else. Peter chamor. Now, this is the only one that we do something a little bit different. Instead of asking where do we get it from, they seem to think that's obvious. But what they ask is, Nema matnitin deloka Rabbi Shimon. Okay, remember, this is the firstborn donkey, which is supposed to be redeemed for a seh, for a lamb or sheep. And then you're supposed to, bring that as a sacrifice. Or if you don't do that, then you have to break the neck of the animal, the chamor. So let's suggest, or they're saying like this, are you really trying to say our Mishnah is not like Rabbi Shimon? How do we know? Because Tanya, Rabbi Petar Chamor Asur Bahana'an. Derive Rabbi Yehuda. First opinion in the Mishnah is Rabbi Yehuda, and he says Petar Chamor is forbidden to benefit. That matches our Mishnah perfectly. Rabbi Shimon Matil, but in this Braita it says that Rabbi Shimon permits. So it sounds like our Mishnah doesn't match Rabbi Shimon because he doesn't think it's forbidden to benefit from. To which Amar Rav Nachman Amar Rav Ravua la'achar arufa v'divrei hakol. Their machloket is not about our topic. Our topic is after you break its neck. They're talking about before you break the neck of the chamor. Okay, at that point, right, this is like a bit of a debate. Is your firstborn chamor, since you're going to eat it anyway, right? You're going to slaughter it. You're supposed to switch it for a seh and then slaughter it. Is it yours or is it mamon gavoa? Right, that seems to be the machloket anyway. Like the masir sheni, it's very similar. So that's their machloket. But once you break its neck, like if you don't do the redeeming and you break its neck, at that point everyone agrees it's forbidden b'hana'an. That's what our Mishnah is talking about. So in the end, it's not like our Mishnah only matches Rabbi Yehuda's opinion, not Rabbi Shimon. Basar b'chalav. Now we get to a very famous sugya that we mentioned yesterday. And what you might find surprising about this, because you probably know the first one, although you might not, but it's very well known, that you're going to be surprised to know that there's another opinion about this. Ditana debe Rabbi Yishmael, lo tevashel gdi b'chalev imo, shalosh pa'amim. This appears 3 times in the Torah, the exact same pasuk, which is very strange. So what are this drasha? Echad isur achila, echad isur ana'ah, echad isur bishul. Okay, one is to say you can't eat milk and meat mixed together. One is to say you can't benefit from milk and meat mixed together, right? Like for example, if you have a kosher restaurant, okay, I'll say specifically kosher because if it's not kosher, there's ein isur halal isur, but that's a whole other topic. You have a kosher restaurant where you mix, okay, it's a bit of an oxymoron, but you have kosher ingredients and then you mix milk and meat together and you cook them together and you sell it to other people. You don't eat it, but you make money off of it. That's a problem. Okay, echad isur bishul, and one is to cook it, right? The whole, and this actually reflects on all the others. Basar b'chalav is forbidden by the Torah only if it's cooked. Okay, so one is for the basic lo tevashel, don't cook it. One is to say don't eat it, and one is to say you also can't benefit from it. So that's the source. But now the Gemara says you should know matnitin deloki aitana, but our Mishnah doesn't match. In this case, we're actually going to say not should we suggest, and it's actually isn't a machloket tannaim that we thought from the previous, but this actually is a machloket tannaim, and not everyone agrees with this. Tanya Rabbi Shimon ben Yehuda Omer, basar b'chalav asur b'achila umutar b'hana. You can benefit from it. Why? Well, they're going to derive it from nevela, just like we talked about yesterday. Nevela, not right. An animal dies or is killed in some other way other than shchita. So you can't eat the meat, but you can give it to your dog. You're allowed to benefit from it. So now we're going to darshan similar language and say, shenemal in this case, ki am kadosh atala Hashem Elokecha, lo tevashel di b'chalev imo. So in the pasuk of lo tevashel di b'chalev imo, it says, because you are a sanctified people, a sanctified nation. Ula halanu omer, when it comes to nevela, it says, anshe kodesh tiyun li, be for me sanctified people. Mala halana sor b'achila mutar b'ana'ah. So since the same language appears there, and there it's forbidden to eat and permitted to benefit from, so likewise here, it's forbidden to eat, but permitted to benefit. So there you see that there's an opposing opinion. Very interesting, because usually when we learn it, we learn about the 3, and then everyone says, 3 times, that's what we learn for the 3 times. He obviously has to give a different explanation to why it appears 3 times, because he thinks it's actually permitted to benefit. Now we get to the last topic. It's also, I think, the last topic on the Mishnah and the last topic for today. I'll check in that. It's the last on the Mishnah. Okay, so find it right now. Here we go. Yeah. Okay, our last topic in the Mishnah, chulin shenishchatu b'azara. Let's talk about this. We've seen this a lot of times before, where if I want to bring a voluntary chatat, this often happens when we've had these cases. I'm not sure if I have to bring a chatat or not. Should I bring it? Or there's like different situations where, like I have money designated for a sacrifice, not sure which sacrifice, right? If it's an ola, I can always bring a voluntary ola. If it's a shlomim, I can always bring a voluntary shlomim. But chatat and nashim, you can't bring voluntarily. And if you do, it's basically, and it wasn't the one you were obligated in, you bring this like condition. If it is, then right, that's my chatat. If it's not, it's voluntary. Well, You can't do that because that's chulin shenishchatu b'azara. You're basically having something that doesn't belong in the temple because there is no such thing as a voluntary chatat, and you're slaughtering it in the azara. But the more simple case of chulin shenishchatu b'azara is, I'm having a barbecue, having a bunch of friends over, and I decide, I live near the temple, good place to slaughter it. They have all these rings on the floor where they put the animal, and let me just slaughter it there. Obviously, you can't do that. Okay, that's really the classic case. So now we want to know, how do you know that if I did this, I took my animal that I was just planning to eat in my house, not bring as a sacrifice, and I slaughtered it in the temple, it's forbidden not only to eat, but also I can't sell it. Or get any benefit from it. How do we get this? Rabbi Yochanan mishum Rabbi Meir. Now we're going to compare two things. It's going to be kind of like the mechaper and the machshir, which the language was a little confusing. Also, the language is going to be a little confusing. There's shali b'shali and shalach b'shalach. Okay, let's explain what this is. There's what's called shchutei chutz. That's kind of the opposite case. What does that mean? I'm supposed to bring it as a sacrifice. I designated the animal for a sacrifice, and I'm planning to bring this as a sacrifice. But what do? I don't slaughter it in the temple where I'm supposed to. I slaughter it outside the temple. So it's the opposite. Okay, and we're going to have sheli, which is God's, which means sacrifice. Shalach is going to be your own meat that you want. And bishali is in my place, which is the temple, because it's God speaking. And shalach, bishalach is in your place, which is outside the temple. So we're going to have a mix of these things. So let's read it inside. Amrat Torah. Okay, by the way, we're going to have two different sources here because the first source is going to be rejected. This is our first source, which we'll soon reject. This is why we're going to try to prove how the chulin that were slaughtered inside are forbidden to benefit from. And basically, before I read it, I'll just tell you we're going to learn it from shchutei chutz. It's the opposite of shchutei chutz. This is something from the outside that's brought inside, and not something from the inside that's brought outside. Okay, so Amrat Torah shchot li b'shali. V'shalach b'shalach, or shali b'shali, v'shalach b'shalach. Okay, slaughter mine in my place in the temple, slaughter your stuff outside the temple. Now we're going to say, and therefore they're comparable. Ma shali b'shalach asul. Well, if you take my stuff and you slaughter it outside, that's shchutei chutz, then af shalach b'shali asul. So chulin shenishchatu b'azara are going to be forbidden as well. To which the Gemara says, ima shali b'shalach anush karet. If you're making this comparison, then make it all the way. Now, shchutei chutz, it says in the pasuk, if you take this sacrifice and you slaughter it outside the temple, outside the Ol Moed, it says that, we'll see it in a minute, you get karet. So then they say, well, then chulin shenishchatu b'azara should also get karet, right? Which it doesn't. So ima shalach b'shalach, shali b'shalach. If you do my stuff outside, you're anush karet. So af shali b'shali, shalach b'shali, also yours in my place, meaning chulin b'azara, anush karet. To which they say, no, that's because. So you're right. Theoretically, this comparison should lead to that, which it doesn't. So you have a problem. But the reason is because there's a special pasuk there. Amar kra el petach ol moed lo hevio la'akriv korban l'Hashem v'nichrat. It says specifically in the pasuk, when are you going to get karet? If you don't bring it to petach ol moed, to bring as a sacrifice, then you will get karet. So al korban anush karet. Al chulin shenishchatu b'azara ein anush karet. What they're saying here is it has to be called a korban, for you, a sacrifice for you to be. If you just take your barbecue meat that you want to, barbecue up, and you decide to slaughter it in the temple, that's not even a korban. There's no punishment of karet if it's not a korban. Okay, so they say that's not a problem. But then the Gemara is going to totally reject this theory. Because basically, what are they saying? We're learning it from shchutei chutz, but not for karet. Well, then something is weird, because if we're learning it out from shchutei chutz, we're saying they're basically the same. And that's why we can learn one from the other, right? One is shali b'shalach and one is shalach b'shali. Okay, they're the basic same idea, just the reverse. But if one is anush karet, ikal mifrach, we can knock this out and say, ma shali b'shalach sheken anush karet. But if shchutei chutz get karet and chulin that were slaughtered in the azara don't get karet, then obviously shchutei chutz is much more severe. Which means if it's much more severe, well, that would explain why it's forbidden to eat and forbidden to benefit from. But you can't learn to something less severe. Then it doesn't make any sense. Okay, Ella, so therefore, knocked out. So Ella Amar Abaye, we're actually not going to finish this today because it continues on to tomorrow's daf, but we're going to have a Braita with three parts to it. Okay, first we're going to darshan this pasuk, Ella Amar Abaye Mehach. We're going to take three psukim in the beginning of Vayikra that all mention in the beginning of Vayikra, they start going into sacrifice. If you bring this animal, if you bring that, if you bring for this sacrifice, that. And in all of these psukim, it says it three times. It says ushchato in one pasuk, v'shachatoto in one pasuk, v'shachatoto in one pasuk. Each time it tells you you have to slaughter. You have to slaughter it. Now, it's kind of obvious you have to slaughter it, right? And you don't have to say it three times. So there's 3 additional psukim that aren't really necessary. What can we learn from these? Ma Talmud lama. To which they start to explain. Now we're going to do, it's a 3-pronged braita. First, we're going to learn that chulin that are slaughtered inside is no good. You can't do it. Then we're going to learn, not only can you not do it, but you also can't eat it. Then we're going to learn, this braita is going to prove our point, which is not only can you not eat it, it's also forbidden to benefit from. That we're going to get to tomorrow because we're only going to see the beginning of this braita. But it's basically going to do the same thing 3 times. In fact, the first time I read it, I said, why is it repeating? It's saying the same thing we just said, and it took me a minute to figure out. The first was, it's forbidden. The second is, it's forbidden to eat once you do it. Now, there's one thing, you can't do it. But maybe if you did it, you can eat it. No, you can't eat it. And then there's the third, which is, it's also forbidden to benefit. So, but within each one, there's going to be a few stages. So this whole section in Sefer Devarim, which says, if you are not near the temple anymore, okay, we're going to read it right now. If you are far from the temple and you want to slaughter animals because you want to eat them, okay, the next word is va'achalta, and you want to eat it. So you're allowed to, okay, it seems like originally if you wanted to eat meat, you would slaughter it and bring it as a sacrifice and then eat the rest of the meat that was permitted, a shlamim. But now God says, listen, there might be times where it's too far to bring it to the temple. So what are you going to do? It's called basar ta'avav. You just want to eat meat for the sake of eating meat, not because you want to bring it as a sacrifice to God. Because it says, it's telling you not only if you're far away and you can't come to the temple, but make sure you're rachok from the temple. Don't do it inside the temple. What does that teach you? Right? It's telling you, stay far away from the temple. When you want to do this, don't slaughter your animal in the temple. Now they say, well, wait, but maybe, and we're going to do this within each stage, maybe this is only maybe it's only complete animals that aren't blemished. Because again, we're saying don't slaughter what you normally would have slaughtered in the temple if you brought as a sacrifice, but something maybe that couldn't be brought as a sacrifice, maybe it's not forbidden. How do we know also? Well, a Baal Mum is let's say a cow. A cow can be brought. Okay, it happens to be blemished, but other cows like that could be brought. So therefore, you can't slaughter it inside either. What about chayot, undomesticated animals, which are not able to be brought as sacrifices? Well, it's like animals because they get slaughtered like animals. How do we know birds? Now they say, from there you learn the fact that it says 3 times, animals, right, domesticated, non-domesticated, and birds. Now they say, second stage, well, maybe you can't do it, but if you did it, you could eat the meat. Because it adds the word v'achalta, and you will eat it outside, comes to teach you, you can only eat what you slaughter far away from the temple, not what you slaughter inside the temple. This comes to include chulin that were slaughtered in the temple. So there we get isur achila. Like I said, we'll see tomorrow isur hana. We're also going to see that all the things they said, maybe it's not forbidden to eat it if it's blemished. And they're going to go through the exact same drasha we said right now. What about birds? What about, right, all those things we're going to go through again and repeat them, but in the section of the eating isur. So what we did today, very briefly, we started with, we finished up with the etz and darshaning etim. Then we went through egla, arufa, tzipurei, metzora, right? What are the sources for this? And why, again, is there a difference? We got off on a sidetrack between the shchuta and the one that gets sent off. 3 reasons potentially why the one that gets sent off is the one that's permitted. And then we went to the peter chamor, the source for that, right? The se'ar nazir, what the source is. The peter chamor, is the Mishnah only one opinion? No, we actually figured it out. It's with all of them. Basar b'chalav, we actually saw was a machloket tannaim, and we saw the source for it. And then chulin sh'nishchatu b'azara, what's the source? We brought one, we rejected it. We're in the middle of finding the second source. With that, we'll finish for today. Wishing everybody a very peaceful day, and may we have a better day than yesterday.